That you have accepted my invitation to do this interview with regards to the project on obsolete and emerging technology. Now, I have a few questions here I'd like to ask you, and feel free to answer. It's your own opinion as a teacher. Now, let's begin. How long have you been a maths teacher?
uh, 4+ years.
Okay, that's good. So, do you enjoy teaching mathematics and why?
I do. I like showing students procedures and how to do the mathematics. I enjoy seeing them succeed and understand it and be happy about understanding it. I like showing them how math is applied or used in everyday life as well.
Okay, that's good. So, how often do you use technology in your classroom? I'm assuming that you use technology in your classroom.
Every day, I use technology. We use smartboard projectors, computers. Students use computers to help them with things they're having difficulty with, different various math problems.
So, do you enjoy using the technology in the classroom and why?
Um, I guess using the technology makes it easier to help students see, especially in a evolving world that is moving towards the use of technology in their everyday life. It makes their learning of these mathematical concepts more apparent and more, or make them feel like they're actually using something they're going to use later on in life.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned a while ago that there are a few technology devices that you use in your classroom. Is there a dominant technology device that you use in the mathematics classroom per se?
The dominant technology that I use is probably the computer. I use that from everything from doing grades to uh, helping students do individual topics using various programs online, so the internet, and also setting up my lessons and showing them presentation,
Okay,
showing them
all
presentations.
right. So, does the calculator fit into that dominance any at all?
The calculator is more of a side. I use the calculator in order for them to uh, see math concepts in addition to what the calculator can do. Like the calculator can show like vertexes and axes of symmetry of parabolas a lot faster than doing the graph over and over and over again. So I know it's important for them to practice, but they also need to have more topics in their repertoire of understanding. So they use the graphing calculator to speed that process up, or something like that.
Okay, that's the graphing calculator. Um, you said you have been in the system for about 4 years or so. I don't know if there was a previous calculator being used before the graphing calculator. Do you have any knowledge of any prior calculators that were used before the graphing calculator?
Yeah, we prior to the graphing calculator, we used the scientific calculator, which actually in some college classes they don't allow graphing calculators. So I had to use scientific because the graphing calculator can do the derivatives and integrals that they're trying to test. So they wouldn't allow us to use graphing calculators. So scientific, and then as well as just uh, basic operations.
So, is there a basic difference between the scientific and the graphing calculator use at the high school level? Because you mentioned the college level. Is there a basic use between those two at the high school level?
The scientific calculator allows students to see things more visually. I'm sorry, the graphing calculator allows students to see things more visually, where the scientific calculator can do the operations. They can explain or they can give the answer for the sign of a degree. The graphing calculator can actually have the students see how the graph oscillates between positive and negative, and it can show things much more visually, like graphs, charts, using plots for statistics, that type of thing. So I would say the main difference is the visual learner is helped, and it allows them to see more advanced topics like statistics, graphs, like data, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you. So, were you trained any at all in the use of the graphing calculator? And if training, was that training adequate enough?
I was trained. Mostly the training that I got was in high school, using the type of things that I'm now teaching. So it's like a computer. Once you learn the process, it's not too difficult to repeat. So everyone can go to the internet on the computer now, but back like 10 years ago, everyone couldn't go to the internet. So once you get taught, so once you learn the process of how to use the calculator, it's not too difficult. I forgot the second
Okay,
question.
all right, I understand. It has to do with the difference
Oh, was it
between the
adequate?
graphing
Yeah.
and right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, it was adequate for what I'm using it now.
okay, that's great. One final question here before we wrap up this interview, Mr. Mansell. Would you recommend the use of this emerged mathematics technology, otherwise called the graphing calculator, in other schools, and why?
There's pros and cons to using graphing calculators. If you really want students to figure out on their own why graphs behave the way they do for Algebra 2, maybe then just use a scientific calculator. Graphing calculators do allow, though, to take more of a width of topics, like a broader width of topics versus learn in depth some specific topics. That scientific calculators would allow students to take more of a deeper understanding of why graphs are behaving the way they are, because they're computing every single number to show why they're behaving that way. Whereas graphing calculators, sometimes that's glossed over, and they don't really understand why a cubic function behaves the way it does, and the quadratic function behaves the way it does because they just put it into the calculator. So there are pros and cons. I would say overall, especially in the New York State testing era, the graphing calculator is a more beneficial tool. However, I definitely would say there are pros and cons to both approaches.
Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the interview. I want to thank you, Mr. Mansell, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this interview. And I hope that my audience will appreciate what you have said and take it into consideration. And thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Spacebar. Spacebar doesn't stop.